Hey everybody, welcome back. We're the Menschwarmers, your bi-weekly look at the world of Jews and sports. Gabe, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm very good. We're flying, I guess, nude tonight. Is that the right phrase? Our producer Michael had a child emergency, so the inmates are really running the asylum tonight.
Yeah, that's right. We can just talk about. I don't know if there's anything that Michael stops us from talking
No,
about. But
it turns out
our personal golf games. Gabe, you playing any golf lately?
or our true passion, French cooking. We would love for this to be a cordon bleu style podcast, but our producer just keeps a really tight rein on us and forces us to talk about Jews and sports the whole time.
Yeah, this is Jews and sports, not Julia Child and sports.
Yeah,
Jews,
that's true.
Jews and Julia. We should do a little Jews and Julia.
Jules and Julia would be a good corner, or Julia Child corner. Is there any Jewish?
Have you watched the Julia Child HBO show?
I haven't. Although HBO will become relevant later on in this episode. I've not. Does Julia Child have any Jewish connection?
So
She probably once said some sort of slur about Jews.
I don't know that she was anti-Semitic. I think that there were people in her world who were Jewish. I don't think Judith Jones was. Although, so her publisher, Judith Jones, also was like the person who found the Diary of Anne Frank and got it published by Knopf, I think.
Really? That's an amazing story.
So that's just fun tidbit. Like, that's just wild to be like, yeah, I have two big hits in my career, Anne Frank and Julia Child. I mean, she also published a lot of other stuff. She was sort of a legendary publisher. But I guess the Knopf people, what's her name? Judith Light plays the Knopf publisher, who's a real life figure, and it's got some Jews in the show, and Bebe Neuwirth's in it. David Hyde Pierce from Frasier also plays her husband. I would say that, so. Yeah, so this is enough talk about the Julia Child show. Just to say, it's not a very good show because there's no conflict in it. Everyone just wants Julia to succeed and works on that, and she does.
Ooh, lovely souffle, Julia. I think there is a connection here, which is that she was in the OSS during World War II, and World War II notably featured a lot of Jewish people. Speaking of which, tonight we're talking about one of a very recently released HBO Max movie released on Yom HaShoah 2 weeks ago, starring Ben Foster, called The Survivor. The Survivor tells the story of Harry Haft, a man who survived in his time in Auschwitz and adjacent camps by boxing, basically to save his life. But not to spoil that, let's get on before we talk about the movie. What's new in the news of Jews and sports, Jamie?
Well, right off the bat, pun intended, I want to talk about our bashing boy chick himself, Rowdy Tellez, who has just been on a tear the last few weeks. Rowdy Tellez, dearly departed from our Toronto Blue Jays to the Milwaukee Brewers last year. In the last 2 weeks, has just been on a tear. Four home runs, 13 RBIs in the last few weeks, including an 8 RBI game on May 4th against the Reds. Now, I guess that's sort of like playing a AAA team, but still impressive. He set a Brewers record for most RBIs in a game with 8. So he is out of the gate charging, and he's going to be a big guy on the Brewers this year, a team that looks to compete in the NL Central.
And he also won the Player of the Week.
Yeah, so congratulations to him. Rowdy's definitely, the big boy chick on campus so far in terms of Jewish hitters this year. Alex Bregman hasn't really rounded into form yet. It's still early. It's only midway through May, so it's very early to start thinking about what the issues might be. But good to see Rowdy off to a good start, and proving that as a bat first, DH/first baseman, he can really have a place in the league. I don't even know if he's been playing much DH this year. I think he's really stuck as
playing first. It's been fabulous to see.
The Brewers have the very similarly shaped Dan Vogelback as well, right? So
yes, I think
one of them's got a DH.
You'd expect a player to be a star for the Brewers who looks like they enjoy beer. Rowdy.
Oh, that's true. That's good. That's a good point.
Got like the big beard. He's got a shaved head. He's very smiley, sort of like Zaftig, but in like a beefy sort of way. Like he's definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
Like a guy you think of when you think of Milwaukee.
Yeah, he would not look out of the place like running the tap room at a craft brewery. being like, "You got to try this Hellas, man. It's so good." And just he's bearded, sort of shaved head.
Exactly.
Got sort of like a modern day Friar Tuck look.
Can we call him Tellez-Bach? It's like a Hellas-Bach beer. He's Rowdy Tellez-Bach. It's not bad. It's not bad. So that's one big story about Jews in sports this week. But another one in the world of golf.
Jamie? Yeah, Max Homa won again. Yeah, sorry. Max Homa won the Wells Fargo Championship. He won by 2 strokes.
It's his second Wells Fargo win. I don't want to make a joke about Jews in banking, but...
Yeah, he won in 2019 as well. This is his second win on the 21-22 tour. So pretty impressive, He won by 2 strokes, sort of. Him and Keegan Bradley were going back and forth on Sunday, but he came out ahead. He's now ranked 29th in the world. I think that's the first time he's been in the top 30.
It is.
Which I think is... pretty meaningful just in terms of like how competitive he's been playing this year. He's had 4 other top 20s, or 5 other top 20s, I think, in this season, along with the win. And he's just really rounding into form. Didn't have a great Masters, made the cut, came in 48th. But PGA Championship coming up in 2 weeks. Who knows?
He's doing very, very well, and now, thanks to him and Daniel Berger, we have 2 current Jews in the top 30 in the world in golf, which, as far as we can tell, has never happened before. They both have 4 wins.
And Gabe, I saw a tweet that you did about how he has to catch up to Corey Pavin, the all-time Jewish PGA Tour leader. How many?
Pavin has 15 wins.
Pavin has.
The real question is, how many of those wins did he get while he was still Jewish? And then how many after he converted? Is there a timeline at which there are Jewish wins versus non-Jewish wins?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is something we've talked about ages ago, about whether Corey Pavin counts as a Jewish athlete. Jewish by birth, but converted at some point. But I will say, in re-examining that issue, I did find, and he doesn't, he's a retired golfer. He doesn't have the biggest social media presence, but I did find a April 2020 Instagram post where he has posted what looks to be gefilte fish and matzo balls and matzo ball soup. And he says, "Thank you, cousins, for the Passover meal. Happy Passover to you as well. Hashtag Passover. Hashtag Moses let my people go." So
that's a good
is the jury
hashtag.
out? I have no idea. That's not, hey, I've denounced Christ. I'm back in the fold. And I'm not saying that is something he should, be needing to do. I'm not trying to get into the weeds here about his actual religious beliefs, but I would say that makes him, he can be a converted Christian, but he still
has some. It's still his cousins. I do
celebrating Passover.
Have the answer, by the way, if we're going to be sort of specific on this.
Sure.
He converted to Catholicism or to Christianity, and I think fairly biblical evangelical Christianity in 1991.
Yeah.
By the end of the 91 season, he had 9 wins on tour. So that means Homa and Berger, if we're going strictly by the letter of halakha, the halakhic rule of how many wins did Corey Pavin have, that is 9 wins. So that's 5 left for Berger and Homa to get to pass. To pass. However, Pavin only won 1 major, the 95 U.S. Open. So if either of them were to win 2 majors, that would probably put them ahead. I think it's Mario Party rules, where one major is worth as many other non-major wins as you can come up with.
Sure. There was one other thing from a recent event in the individual sports I wanted to mention, although not in an individual sport per se, but Diego Schwartzman, the diminutive, I would say, Jewish tennis player from Argentina, made his debut pairing at the Italian Open with John Isner.
Yes.
They are on to the round of 16, and the amazing thing is Diego Schwartzman is quote unquote 5'7". I do not know if that is an actual, but sources say he is shorter than 5'7".
Mm-hmm.
John Isner is 6'10". And despite his name, I would say sort of Jewish standard, not Jewish guy, just a regular American.
Yes.
But they are at least 15, somewhere between 15 and 17 inches apart in terms of their height. A picture of them together, it's like twins, or like that famous picture of Manute Bol and Muggsy Bogues.
Exactly.
It's like,
is he a Trump guy? Isner seems like he'd be a Trump guy.
I don't know if he is. I know Tennis Sandgren. That guy's a big
that guy's a big Trump guy.
John Isner, I'm not sure, but watching him pair up with Diego, and first of all, it's a great combination because Isner's got this ridiculous serve, obviously because of his leverage of being multiple meters tall. And Diego has the best return game in the business, basically. Lots of speed. So I think they work well together. I mean, they're into the round of 16 at the Italian Open. So definitely have a chance to win this and maybe stick together if they work well with doubles.
Especially as Roland Garros is coming soon for the two of them to stay on clay, where the two of them sort of have this excitement together.
Yeah. It's otherwise been a bit of a disappointing clay season for Diego.
Yep.
He is, because I don't know exactly how the different properties of the different tennis courts work, but clay seems to be his forte. He made it to the French Open quarterfinals last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can't remember exactly, but I think he made it pretty far in some of the clay season matchups. Towards the end of 2021. The French Open, again, he made a semifinal in 2020. It's really been his best one. So it's a little disappointing. I think he's sort of getting towards the end of his window. Well, he's turning 30 this year.
Yes,
and tennis players.
Although small tennis
exactly
players
age
tend to
one.
last a little bit longer. Thinking about Andre Agassi and Roger Federer, for example.
That's true.
That said, I think tennis has sort of been a little bit different, in the last couple of years, as we've seen guys with a lot of different body types have success. But, if, God forbid, this is sort of towards the end of Diego Schwartzman, we've got sort of a new, also Spanish-speaking right-handed replacement in Alejandro Davidovich, who recently made it, into the last clay tournament of the year before this Italian Open. It ended, I guess, a week and a half ago. The Monte Carlo Masters in Monaco, where Davidovich lost to Stefanos Tsitsipas in the finals. But after beating Djokovic, Goffin, and Taylor Fritz, another Jewish adjacent player, on the way to it. So it's Davidovich is somebody absolutely look to watch, who's coming into French Open on a heater, and just like Diego Schwartzman, has a chance to make some noise.
Yeah. So, definitely some guys to watch in advance of the French Open. I think it starts a week Sunday. I mean, we're recording on May 11th, so it should be starting within 2 weeks or so.
Yep.
It's the sort of... It's not the first major, but I feel like it's the first major people watch in this part of the world because the Australian Open happens at some godforsaken hour, way on the other side of the world. And the French Open is that nice, Sunday morning, Saturday morning watching where it's like, oh, it's 8 a.m. Is there professional sports on? Oh, great, the French Open.
Yes.
That's it's that perfect, it's like why people like watching Premier League soccer.
And it has that sort of iconic, color palette of the green seats and the orange clay. In what makes it sort of probably the wildest thing is that Rafael Nadal is going to be going for his 14th French Open title. If he could just give one of those to Diego Schwartzman, I personally would be particularly thrilled. Maybe even his countryman Alex Davidovich. If he could give maybe his 14th to one, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, it's been sort of unreal to watch him the last few years and just sort of dominate on clay. So I'm sure that'll be the storyline again this year. But,
truly amazing.
We'll see if we're all cheering "Go Diego, go!" See how far he can make it.
Vamos Diego.
As the clay season heads into its Grand Slam. Gabe, before we dive deep into the Survivor, any other Jews and sports news you wanted to talk about?
It was a disappointing couple of weeks for the Stroll family and the Stroll team. In the last couple of F1 events, most recently in the Jewish Mecca of Miami. There were a lot of celebrities there, not particularly Jewish. DJ Khaled made it on TV a couple of times. Dwayne Wade made it on TV a couple of times. But even though they didn't, succeed in reaching a podium, Stroll actually got his first points of the year.
Oh wow!
Yes, he finished 10th after starting the race dead last. So there was a technical penalty that put them at the end of the grid, and he worked his way up to 10th and got Aston Martin's first points of the year. So very exciting. Mazel tov to Lance Stroll on getting his first point of the season in, I guess, the Jewish Mecca of Miami.
There was one other thing I wanted to talk about, not exactly sports related, but sports media adjacent, which was that a trailer dropped for a Netflix movie coming out next month called Hustle, starring Adam Sandler as a basketball scout. It's being produced by LeBron James. It also stars Ben Foster as what appears to be a Sam Hinkie or
Brian Colangelo.
Brian Colangelo type, by which I mean a a Sixers GM.
We're going to get into this in a bit, but Ben Foster is a Jewish guy who's very good at playing any sort of generic white guy. Like, he is Jewish, but he's like, I think him and Aaron Paul could probably be switched out in a lot of places and you wouldn't notice, except Foster is Jewish.
This will be, now in Hustle, this will be his third major sports movie after The Program, where he played Lance Armstrong and The Survivors. So, he's coming into his sort of Sandler zone of being a Jewish sports star, Jewish sports movie star. I
really liked The Program. And if we ever get a chance to talk to Mr. Foster about The Survivor, I know our producer Michael is working on that. I would love to pick his brain about what it was like playing Lance Armstrong. Yeah. In his words, one of the greatest villains in sports history.
So I would say we're looking forward to the Hustle, not The Hustle, the Anne Hathaway Rebel Wilson joint from a few years ago, but Hustle, not The Hustler.
Yes,
which is the Paul Newman pool movie.
Yes, another Jewish sports movie, a Jewish sports movie that we could discuss once on Film Corner.
So I said, Gabe, I said on Twitter, the Sandler sports movie ranking for me is Gilmore, Uncut Gems, Waterboy. 4 is 8 Crazy Nights, the animated movie, and 5 is The Longest Yard. Do you agree with that, generally speaking?
I think
not to put you on the spot too much.
No, I think that's pretty
good ranking.
I think I would agree with Happy Gilmore at number 1. I think most Sandler heads, sand heads, is that the right way to do it? Would agree with that. Unfortunately, I guess this is his first sort of like auteur, serious, not comedy sports movie. Previously, most of them have been in the comedy
category. I mean, Uncut Gems is a manic, romp. Not exactly a comedy, but not exactly a drama, like not tugging at your heartstrings. This seems a little bit more like this guy's one last chance at redemption by taking Juan Hernan Gomez to the pros. Like that's his move here.
Exactly. So no, you're right. I think that's probably his best sports movie. Also, you could discuss Pixels, the video game movie.
Good point. I hadn't thought about that.
I know a bunch of people who were extras in that movie. It was made in Toronto, but it was not good. That said, the one thing you're missing, which, because it features a lot of sports, I would put probably between Gilmore and Uncut Gems, or maybe just after Uncut Gems, is You Don't Mess with the Zohan, which features both the Israeli traditions of pro kadima on the beach, the paddleball game, and there is a dramatic hacky sack tournament inside the movie.
That is a good point.
So it's a great sports movie about peace between the Jews and the Palestinians, the Israelis and the Palestinians, through their love of hacky sack. Therefore,
all right. So
mutual love of hummus and hacky sack.
Right. Once Hustle comes out, we might have to do a revised Sandler sports rankings with a little more thought put into it. Maybe we'll slot in the basketball scenes from Grown Ups, like Shaq's performance from Grown Ups in there.
Yes.
And see where it ranks. I mean, I think I'll definitely watch it. It's on Netflix, so it's it's easy to watch, and
it's going to. I don't think I've watched a Sandler movie on Netflix yet, but I will watch this one for sure.
I do think that Happy Gilmore has to take the number 1 spot no matter what, though, because I would say I haven't really played a round of golf where somebody hasn't referenced Happy Gilmore.
Yes, I think that's impossible.
I think that's probably true for most millennials.
If you're a millennial playing golf, someone will make a Happy Gilmore reference at some point within the 18 holes virtually all the time. Also important to remember, we've discussed this on the podcast, I think a lot of Adam Sandler characters are, but Happy Gilmore is a canonically Jewish professional athlete. It is in the Hanukkah song that Happy Gilmore is A, on the PGA Tour, and B, Jewish. which is very, very. It's rare to see in a sports movie to have a Jewish lead, so we're happy that Gilmore is doing that for us.
Plus his grandmother is played by Frances Bay, Frances Evelyn Goffman of Manville, Alberta. So I think that's as Jewish as it gets.
How many Jews were in Manville, Alberta at the time of Frances Bay's birth?
That is a good question. We'll have to get Ralph Ben-Mergy to help.
That's a great opportunity.
Good question for you, Chubitzville.
Yeah, great question, producer Mike. We're gonna follow up on that and see if we can get a crossover episode talking about the life and times of Happy Gilmore's grandma, Frances Bay. We're gonna take a short break. Should we take a break? I think we should take a quick break and then get on to talking about The Survivor.
From award-winning journalist Marcia Lederman comes Kiss the Red Stairs, a compelling memoir of Holocaust survival, intergenerational trauma, divorce, and discovery that will guide readers through several lifetimes of monumental change. Marcia was 5 when a simple question led to a horrifying answer. She asked her mother why she didn't have any grandparents. Her mother told her the truth: the Holocaust. Decades later, her parents dead and herself a mother to a young son, Marcia begins to wonder how much history has shaped her own life. Reeling in the wake of a divorce, she craves her parents' help. But in their absence, she is gripped by a need to understand the trauma they suffered, and she begins her own journey into the past to tell her family stories of loss and resilience. Kiss the Red Stairs, available now wherever books are sold.
So we're back. We'd like to spend the second half of the pod today talking about the recently released Barry Levinson film, The Survivor. I should say that we'll try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, at least in the beginning. But, this is a story from 70-odd years ago. It's sort of like one of those things, like a matter of public record.
Yep.
So if you really feel strongly about watching the movie in advance of hearing us talk, feel free to, pause this and put us back in your pocket. Go watch the movie. I would say from the top, Gabe, I think we both, thumbs up on this one. Definitely recommend it as a movie, aside altogether from the Jewish angle, the sports angle. Just very competently made movie. Barry Levinson, obviously an Academy Award-winning director for Rain Man. Has his sports movie chops, obviously, with The Natural, one of the great baseball movies of all time. And I think this is probably his first sports movie since then. It tells the story of Harry Haft, who's billed in the movie as the survivor of Auschwitz. And it's really a remarkable story, I think.
It absolutely is. As we mentioned sort of at the top of the show, Haft was forced to fight to the death in several boxing matches throughout his time in Auschwitz, and then sort of parlayed that when he was a refugee in America into a number of prize fights in North America.
So there's sort of two
parallel stories going on.
Yeah, exactly, and it jumps back and forth in time quite a bit. The boxing in the camps, as you said, that's the survival part, because that is I think true story. That's part of it, which is that Jews in the camps were forced to fight each other for the guards' entertainment, and if you lost, you were killed often.
Yep.
If you didn't want to box when they wanted you to box, you could be killed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, for our listeners, we don't need to go chapter and verse on the
horrors of the Holocaust.
I'm going to assume our audience is pretty well versed in that. And this is in line with that, and the scenes set in the concentration camp and around that time. They're shot in black and white. I think the brutality is very much on display. And I think really sort of just gets that idea of, there's a bit of a layering of that with just the brutality of boxing as a sport as well. I mean, It is combat. It is a fight. It's a simulacrum of a fight to the death sort of thing, but it has rules and all that. But the boxing that we see in the camps is not that.
It's
brutal.
It's brutal. It's fight to the death. It's there's a notable scene in one of the matches. I think it might be his first one or it might be a second one, where Haft is fighting and he's winning quite badly, and he's like imploring the guy he's fighting, like, don't get up, like, don't fight me, stop, like, let's try and end this. and the guy keeps on fighting. And he keeps on fighting, because it's his survival. He hits him from behind. He tries to do anything to win, and ultimately he is shot by a guard. So it's not the Queensberry rules.
No. And so you see, Haft go through that, and, the already, dehumanized Haft, who's, working in the camps and then sort of forced to box, forced to sort of be the pet of the Nazi soldier or guard who picks him out as a fighter. And
played by Billy Magnuson, who we talked again before the show, before we started recording, really has the Nazi look down.
Yes, very much so. It's very graphic. It's very detailed in terms of how he survives and what he does to sort of make it through the Holocaust and make it out of the camp, and how boxing is sort of integral to that. Now, concurrently at the same time as that, you see his post-war boxing career. You sort of only see the end of it. He didn't have a long career as a boxer. Should say that they actually don't show this in the movie, but historically he did box while he remained in Europe in the DP camps. He was crowned, I think. I just want to make sure I get the title right, because it was a specific title. It probably didn't exist for very long, but in January 1947 he won an amateur Jewish heavyweight championship organized by the U.S. Army.
Yeah, in a refugee camp, from what I understand.
Yeah. Exactly. And so then, a year later, he comes to the United States. Should say that the real Harry Haft is a bit younger than Ben Foster is. Ben Foster's probably in his late 30s or early 40s. Harry Haft, when he was boxing, was like 23 years old.
Yeah.
And, the movie shows sort of what it's like to be that boxer. He is the survivor of Auschwitz. He's not supposed to talk about it because... him and the other Holocaust survivors living in Brooklyn, they just want to keep to themselves and not dredge up the past.
And especially relive, it's sort of a scary part. And there's a scene where he gets sort of yelled at for this when the public knowledge of what he did. Like, he ultimately was responsible for the deaths. Not responsible, it's the wrong way to put it. He, was the hand that killed a bunch of people. Whether or not he was forced to is sort of irrelevant to a lot of people. And he was forced to, and he certainly, when he was on the run from the camps, killed to survive in a number of cases. As well, there's dramatic moments where he's deciding whether to kill another person, and it's very sort of hard to watch in a lot of ways. And I think that sort of leads into a lot of the crux of the movie, and a lot of the reason I think a lot of survivors now don't like to talk about the Holocaust in a lot of different ways. I know, for example, my grandmother, was not particularly interested in talking about it, as there's sort of a lot of guilt in being the survivor. And there's a lot of trauma that you relive, having to go through it and then keep going.
Absolutely, and that's what comes out sort of in the post-war scenes. Talks about his relationship with his wife and his children, and the ongoing trauma from what had happened to him and what he was forced to do. And this sort of terrible thing about not wanting to grapple with what he had to do to survive. As you said, he wasn't responsible for the deaths of the people he fought, but he did sort of contribute to them in some way, and he was forced by this genocidal regime to sort of take that stance. I found the boxing scenes post-war in New York pretty, very well shot, very nicely stylized. There's a very real intensity to it. I mean, I think boxing is so cinematic in some ways that it's like, in a movie version of boxing, you can get the camera in places that the camera can't really go in a real boxing match, and it just shows the sort of the force of it. And so I think it's really beautifully shot in this film. The sort of culmination, there is a bit of a sports movie trope to it, of him gearing up for his fight with Rocky Marciano, who was not at the time, but later obviously became the heavyweight champion of the world, one of the great boxers of all time. And we should say also depicted by Paul Newman in Somebody Up There Likes Me, another movie about boxing. But that's the sort of sports movie cliche of him training and getting ready and stuff like that. He ultimately gets knocked out by Marciano in the third round, and that's his last fight ever. But in the movie, the reason he's doing it is sort of to try to find his girlfriend from before the war, who he hasn't had any contact with, and just to sort of get publicity and get his name in the papers. There's
a very interesting scene I'd like to talk about, sort of Holocaust related, after the Marciano fight. Is sort of after he loses, he is alone by himself in the locker room, having sort of not been humiliated, but beaten pretty bloody. But there's sort of a strange peace I found in that scene where the fight is over, but he's safe and he didn't kill anybody, and he's sort of at peace with with fighting when in a way he has never been before.
Yeah, and I think he talks about that in the movie. It's sort of like, after what he's been through, he's not worried about the guy in the ring with him, because he has his own memories of what happened.
Exactly, and, he's safe
much
in the locker room, completely alone by himself, which is not something he ever had the luxury of being in his years in the camps.
Yeah. So really, really impressive performance by Ben Foster. I would say, sort of transformed, both in terms of when we see him back in the camp and afterwards, in the camp.
Physically, and the aging.
He must have lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, he lost a huge amount of weight to play the character during the Holocaust, and put on a significant amount of weight and muscle to play Harry.
And in Harry his afterwards. 60s, and retired in Miami Beach, like there's scenes of him.
Right.
There could be makeup, there could be prosthetics, but he plays this guy for 60 odd years of his life, and he plays him convincingly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all in all, I think a very good watch. It's available on Crave in Canada.
Yeah, HBO Max in America.
It's on,
it's
HBO
an HBO
Max
original.
In America.
Before we go,
it had.
So I have two small criticisms.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, sure. I have two small criticisms. I'm happy to hear you talk about the first one. You think whenever you see Holocaust movies, and in any Holocaust, they always have to feature a character of like a conflicted Nazi. As if the movie would be too not palatable enough for non-Jews, for the Nazis to just be universally bad. There's a scene in this movie, I won't spoil it, where Billy Magnuson's character sort of laments the inhumanity of the concentration camps. And it's not, he's not a good guy, by no means is the character. And that sort of, I found that scene somewhat unnecessary and a little bit patronizing. Because no, this guy's like an evil motherfucker. Like, he doesn't feel bad about what he's doing in any way, shape, or form, except for this one scene where he talks about sometimes feeling bad.
That's a good point. I think that is probably a bit of an overused trope, that there's the conflicted Nazi, or the Nazi who has second thoughts. But on the other hand, it's like, you got to make characters rounded, and I don't know. You can show the inhumanity of the character, but you want to have something to sort of glom onto as well, or that there's some conflict internally within the character. I understand why it's done. I agree. But I think it's interesting the way even that is done, because, Harry, I think, just sort of like doesn't care what the Nazi Billy Magnuson's character says. Like, he doesn't really listen to him, and he doesn't, obviously he does when he is fighting for him and as a means of survival. But as soon as he is no longer useful for him in terms of survival, he's dispatched with, let's say.
And similarly, I would say, like patronizingly, that scene that we're talking about, they're like having a friendly drink, for the first time in the whole movie. So I had a small problem with that. Also, it took me a little while to get used to, but early in the movie, I think you're going to be shocked by Ben Foster's accent, mostly because when he's playing like a 22-year-old man, he speaks like my 78-year-old grandfather did when I was a child. Like, what? You're telling me that it's cost $5 for the fish? It's that sort of hokey accent.
It is a bit old. Yeah, it is a bit altercocker, but I got used to it, or maybe they.
Yeah, you get used to it. You absolutely get used to it, and a good portion of the movie is in. A good portion of his lines are in, I think, a mix of Yiddish, Polish, and English.
Polish, yeah.
Yeah.
All in all, I thought it was pretty good Jewish representation. We should say Hans Zimmer did the music.
Yep.
Which real change from Dune coming to do this.
Is he Inception as well? I think so.
Yes, that's right. So the music was very good, moving score. There's sort of klezmer elements in the movie. Pretty good Jewish representation, not perfect. I'm a bit of a stickler, or I've had a bit of a peccadillo about Jews being played by Jews, so not perfect in this movie. I say Danny DeVito's in it. He plays Rocky Marciano's trainer, Charlie Goldman.
Yeah.
But I think Danny DeVito gets a pass. Like, do we all agree with that in terms of being able to play Jews?
Yeah.
He's married to one. His child is Jewish. Their children are Jewish.
There's and this is not really an appropriate thing to say in 2022, but I tend to believe that Italians are Jewish and Jewish people are Italians.
I agree.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of cultural overlap between Jews and Italians, and I think that might be, it is Danny DeVito playing Charlie Goldman. It's not like Russell Crowe is playing Charlie Goldman. Right. It's not John Leguizamo was in the movie not playing Charlie Goldman.
Right. Similarly, Vicky Creeps, who people probably remember from Phantom Thread.
Yeah.
She plays Haft's wife, post-war. Not Jewish either, but
she's
say her grandfather was a member of the Luxembourgish resistance.
Yeah, she is Swiss.
There's some good anti-Nazi connection.
Some sort of Swiss Luxembourgian, and I think if you're Swiss or Luxembourgish, I think is the demonym. But if you're Swiss or Luxembourgish, you were either a Nazi or resistance. Like, there's no in between for those neutralish countries.
Yeah, so mixed points in terms of, DeVito and Creeps playing Jewish characters, but otherwise I thought pretty good Jewish representation among most of the characters. Obviously, Ben Foster is Jewish, and I think, I would love to talk to him about this, because I can only imagine that was I don't know that you need to have a Jewish person play that role, but I don't know how a non-Jew could do it justice.
Totally. No,
I do think
you couldn't.
That's part of it.
We can get into this deep, but Peter Sarsgaard character was quite good. Sarsgaard is not Jewish. The character wasn't Jewish, but the character was extremely into sharing the story of the Holocaust as like a moral necessity. Which right. I don't know the particular history about that, and maybe the real life. Emory Anderson felt that way, but that part seemed a little rosy to me.
Yeah, that's probably true. But again, sometimes you need those characters, those reporter types in these movies to do some exposition.
Also, I thought this was interesting. If you're Darzakovsky, Israeli actress, star of the huge hit Beauty and the Baker, played Haft's daughter, Leah. So that's that's a good.
Not his daughter. His girlfriend.
His daughter's girlfriend. His pre-war girlfriend. Yeah. Wow, my mistake. His pre-war girlfriend. Yeah. So that's. There's some. The film ends like most Holocaust movies end with. Here's the survivors. Lasting the children they had, the grandchildren they had. So casting an Israeli actor, I think, tells that story a little bit.
Right. And I wanted to mention just one last thing, which I haven't actually seen this movie, but there's a 1989. Movie with a sort of similar subject matter called Triumph of the Spirit, starring Willem Dafoe and Edward James Olmos and Robert Loggia, about Salomo Aruch, who was a Thessaloniki Jewish boxer who similarly survived the Holocaust by boxing in over 200 matches at Auschwitz as well.
I'm sure there were a lot of people who this happened to.
Yeah, and also similarly had a post-war, a brief post-war and pre-war fighting career, but an interesting story. So maybe something we should check out as well, and contrast and compare. Not something I've heard about as a movie, but obviously Willem Dafoe's an excellent actor.
Yeah,
and be interesting to learn more about the story of Salamo Aruch. I'm not positive on the pronunciation there. My Greek pronunciation is not
what it once was. Obviously not as yes.
I'm sure an interesting story as well. Any last thoughts about The Survivor? I definitely think people should check it out. It's I would say a major Holocaust Holocaust sports film. It's probably the first Holocaust movie in a little while that has sort of captured the brutality of it and really on this interesting axis and this question of sort of what one must do, what one must have done to survive.
Absolutely. I think the movie's absolutely worth watching, and I'm glad to have talked about it. I think we covered most of it, at least most of the information on it, but we're always happy to reach out to us on Twitter or email, and we're happy to chat with you about it more.
Yeah. So why don't we leave it there? As always, we're produced by the Canadian Jewish News. Our producer, Michael Freeman. You can find our podcast articles and everything else on the Canadian Jewish News website, thecjn.ca. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to it.
Tell your friends.
If you don't have tell your friends and nephews
Yeah.
and nieces. If you don't have a podcast app to like and subscribe to this, just ask a younger person in your orbit and they can set that up for you.
Yes. Ask someone bar mitzvah age.
And as always, follow us on Twitter at Benchwarmers. You can hear all our pithy comments and bemoaning the Jays' recent struggles to score any runs. And until next time, we'll see you soon.
This episode has been brought to you by Looking Back, Moving Forward, 160 Years of Jewish Life in BC. Published by the Jewish Museum and Archives of British Columbia for their 50th anniversary, this elegant volume is a once-in-a-generation collection of Jewish life and history throughout the province. Order your copy today at jewishmuseum.ca.